All right, so a question I get a lot is I'm having sciatica and I'm wondering, is it coming from my butt? Like, is there something tight in here, or is it coming from my back? This is a very common question. And so today I kind of want to go over just a little bit how you could determine which one it is and just direct your thoughts and treatment ideas for this, okay? So first off, I kind of want to get the definition of sciatica, right? So sciatica basically just means pain along the distribution of the sciatic nerve, right? So sciatica isn't a diagnosis, it's more of a symptom is what I mean by that. So just a little anatomy here is like, here's the sciatic nerve. It kind of courses through your butt. We're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but it comes down the back of your leg and then it splits off and goes towards the side of your calf and then down into your foot. It obviously goes down the back of your calf too, but typically the distribution of where people feel this is they feel it in their butt, down the back of their leg, and then down the side of their calf into their foot. So when someone talks about sciatica, or if someone's told you you've had sciatica, which often what it is like, I've been told I have sciatica, what is going on? Sciatica is more of a symptom than it is a diagnosis. And what we're going to try to determine a little bit today is two of the more common diagnoses that cause sciatica, okay? And to determine where it's coming from. So the first diagnosis that comes up, or where people are wondering is this sciatica coming from my back, okay? And typically, when you have pain down the back of your leg that comes from your back, it is due to some sort of irritation of the nerve that comes out of your lumbar spine. And so it doesn't always have to be disc, right? People always think it's like, oh, I've slipped a disc or there's pressure from a disc, but it can be, right? So you can either have what we call a mechanical pressure, meaning that some of the disc material is causing what we would call a mechanical deformation of the nerve, right? Like literally pushing into it. And that will cause these symptoms. And the further that deformation is, the further typically down the leg you'll feel it, right? If it's just pushing on the edge, you might just feel it in your back, into your butt. The further it pushes in, it goes into your thigh, down past your knee, towards your foot. So the further down the leg the symptoms are, kind of the worse it is, and the more pressure or irritation of the nerve that you're getting. There are some instances where you can even get a chemical inflammation, chemical irritation of the nerve due to inflammation, and just some stretching of the nerve in that area will cause some symptoms down the leg too. So it's not always mechanical, not always like, oh, I've blown a disc or something like that, right? It can just hurt for no reason sometimes, right? Honestly, I mean, there's a reason, but it's, if you've been in medicine a long time, like I have, then sometimes it's not always clear cut as to exactly what is the reason that nerve is being irritated. You just know it's being irritated, so you have the symptoms down the leg. So if it's coming from your back, there's a couple patterns that you would recognize that would say it's coming from your back. One is that you tend to have probably a little bit more pain with sitting. That means when you're in flexion, that there's more pressure from the disc that's pushing on the nerve. That tends to be a little more common, but not always. Sometimes you can just have aggravation from walking or standing too, but more often than not, it's sitting. If the sitting increases the symptoms down your leg, then that's more likely the disc as far as just the position of sitting, okay? Or just being in flexion. Another reason a way that could be coming from your back is if it tends to be relieved a little bit more through walking, right? Meaning like once you get up and moving a little bit, it tends to relieve a little bit. That's more indicative of the back than the butt. And then another reason it could be the back is if it's the position of your back, meaning like if you find yourself in a position where you're twisting or turning or moving the back and that causes your symptoms, that's more indicative of the back. And so those are some of the symptoms that you would have if it's more the back than the butt. Now for the butt, Typically what we're talking about that causes sciatica or symptoms down the leg is piriformis syndrome. So piriformis syndrome, this muscle right here is the piriformis. And what you'll see is that the sciatic nerve comes out right below it. And 90% of people have it coming out right there. There are some studies that show about 10% of people do have a alternative location for where this nerve is, and some will actually go right through the middle of the muscle, up high or above it, and that can cause a little bit of some complications, as if that muscle is tight, then you'll feel it more down the nerve. So the thing that is more indicative of piriformis syndrome causing sciatica than back pain, for me clinically, is if the person feels that the pain is in sitting, but it's because of the pressure of sitting on their butt, right? So remember, I said the back, people will have increased symptoms with sitting, but it's because they're in a flexed position, 90-degree position of the back. And it's just being in that position causes it. Now with piriformis syndrome, it will be because they feel pressure of pushing into the muscle there, which puts pressure on the nerve and causes the symptoms. An example of this would be like if they were sitting in something really a hard chair, then that would cause an increase in symptoms, right? Whereas if they were sitting in something soft, even though they're sitting in both positions, the softer chair wouldn't cause as many symptoms. So the actual pressure of sitting is what causes it. Now, sometimes, especially if, depending on why the piriformis is irritated, which can be a variety of things, it will actually be putting some pressure on the nerve. And then if you try to stretch the nerve, that tends to cause the symptoms to increase. Whereas with sciatica for low back pain, if you do a gentle stretch, it doesn't seem to bother it too much. It actually seems to be okay. But trying to stretch the nerve at all with piriformis syndrome tends to cause an increase in symptoms, a little more so than it would be in the back. It's just a little bit more volatile feeling for the nerve. Going along with the pressure from sitting, the other thing that I find with it being more piriformis syndrome causing sciatica than the back is just the direct pressure of palpation. So if I'm pushing down on the patient's buttocks area, in the area of the piriformis, it tends to feel more like a very specific spot that hurts, like a deep bruise. Whereas someone has sciatica that's coming from the back, it's a little more diffuse. They're like, yeah, my butt sort of, it's achy, but I can't really find one specific spot that really helps it, right? And so those are kind of the main differences between the two as to what could be causing your sciatica. So this is always a question I get. So as far as treatment goes, we have some other videos on how to treat sciatica or low back pain. And you can find those by searching for them here. Sort of some of the bigger things that I tell people to do is people tend to overstretch piriformis syndrome. A little bit of flexibility is okay, but just don't overstretch it. That seems to be the issue. Then for a lot of patients, if it's sort of hard to tell where it's coming from, I treat both of them at the same time. They're some of the things I'm having patients do are very similar to help. And so working into some extension for sciatica, which we have a lot of videos on that, if it's coming from the back, is easy to do while you're treating the piriformis syndrome. So a lot of times just doing a little bit of both is all you need to do. So if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments, and I'll talk to you again soon.